offsuit is like a standard first and raise from the button, as long as you don't commit yourself against someone out of the blinds or something. And even though he seems to be kind of bad, it's still good to raise against him, because he will probably make lots of mistakes against us post flop that justify raising here, even if you don't have as much fold equity as we might have against somebody else. And upper right, we'll just check folding our bottom pair, of course, and upper left, yeah, pocket four, as I said, every pocket pair from every position first in is raisable. And here we would just have made our continuation bet. Since he's donk betting into us, I'm just folding. He might, of course, be very weak and might fold to a raise. There's no option in calling. We can raise or we can fold. But against some 35-22 guy, I don't want to bluff here. It's absolutely no necessary. If we get called, we have no outs at all. So it's actually a pretty bad spot to bluff here. Yeah. Especially if he's passive. He can easily be bet calling like an ace, maybe even a 7, a flush draw, and that's all cards you don't want to see, even if you're ahead against the flush draw. First of all, we're not always seeing the showdown, and second of all, he's got so many outs against us that yeah, it doesn't even make sense to stick money in on the flop. I mean, a flush draw is really has problems. Not having yeah, I think it always has like 12 outs or even more against us, or 11 maybe if he's really unlucky. Yeah, lower left, Jack 10 offsuit against the raise. Even if there is a cold caller, it's an easy fold. If the stacks were deeper, like as deep as mine or even more, you could think of calling here as well. But especially in this situation, and even if the stacks are deeper, this is pretty marginal. So easy foldable. And upper left, King Jack against some middle position limper. You could raise here, especially since he seems to be pretty bad. But once again, you don't have to isolate yourself here out of position. He's probably calling very often, so you just play more raised pots out of position with kind of marginal hand. So you can just check here pre-flop and then just check fold. A flop like this doesn't make too much sense to bluff some guy like him, especially not on a board like this that hits his limping range pretty hard. So we just give up in a situation like that, and yeah, now we have ace king. We're certainly raising that, even out of position, of course. There's no question about this. And we add the extra big blind for being out of position. And yeah, he decides not to call, which is actually good for him since we're way ahead against his range, but yeah. Still we made profit. And lower left, king 7 suited, first in, is a hand you don't have to raise. You can think about it, but you certainly don't have to, not at all. Yeah, so you can as well just let it go pre-flop. And yeah, take another spot. It's super marginal and not necessary to be taken. First goal, of course, would be if you're switching from full ring or something. Yeah, upper left, this is standard again. I would just continuation bet if he checks, and if he is donking, I am just folding. It's the second time somebody donks into me on that table. It's a different player, and once again, we don't have many outs, and I doubt we're getting anything to fold but a bluff, and it's not necessary to jump on that. Where was I? Yeah, the first goal, of course, would be the short-handed player to get used to positions, to the higher preflop aggression, and to the other preflop standards and also postflop standards, and try to become somewhat of a solid winning player. And for that, you don't need to play like loose tag style with like 20, 23, 19 stats. It's certainly not necessary for a start. Actually, I think it would most of the times be minus UV if you played that style at the start. So we're like looking more forward to play some 18, 15, 17, 14 style for a start, and then slowly advance from there. Yeah, ace-8 suited, as I said, suited aces first in our raises. Yeah, and then you have to wait for the action of your opponent. Yeah, with flop top 2 pair. This would be a standard broke actually for 100 big blinds. I'm not folding here just because he might have pocket fours or unlikely 8s or aces. So we would look forward to go broke here, but first of all, if he's checking, we were betting since the board is really dry. We don't even have to make a big continuation bet. I would bet my whole range around about this amount. So I'm betting my top 2 pair the same amount, and he's just folding. And I rewind a little bit. Here lower left we have pocket kings. Button first in raises 3 big blind, small blind cold calls, so we are certainly 3-betting. The question is how big. Since the first in raise is pretty small and there's even a cold caller, I would actually like make it $3.50 for $4. $3.75 I made it here, because I don't want to give anybody too good odds, and I just want to more or less commit everybody to this pot if he has a piece post flop. Yeah. And we get a call. And we get... Do we get another call? No? Yes? Yeah, he has a tough time to decide here. Yeah. Finally he called and we flop an overpair. On this board we are certainly not folding. We're just going broke against 2 people. He just has a 1.5 pot size bet left. He has even less left. So after continuation betting, we are committed. And yeah, since we are always continuation betting, since there are so many worse hands that can pay us off, I'm even looking forward to bet. And yeah, he's all in for min raise, more or less. So we certainly just call. He once again has a tough time to decide, and I think is finally folding. Yeah, we of course call, see turn and river. River is a pretty bad card, but still we are ahead. And yeah, I think I looked it up and he had like pocket 8s. Yeah, so this is certainly no spot to fold. I think this wouldn't be a spot to fold in full ring games either, like never, but certainly here it is not as well. We can be pretty happy to stick the money in here on a flop like this. And especially after the pot has already been so big. If somebody has aces, it's a cooler. If somebody has like 6-7 or pocket 6s, it's a cooler as well. Yeah, but he made a very big mistake pre-flop. And lower left, 10-8 offsuit also, like I said, bigger offsuit 1-gappers also can be raised from the button. Especially if the game is like breaking down a little bit. In this hand we were just 4-handed. Yeah. One more thing about short-handed getting started. Table selection also is, in my opinion, more important than in full-ring games, because here you have to take a little more thought about your opponent, because you're way more often playing against the very same opponent. And if it's like you don't like him, or you don't like to play against him, it's very often just better to leave the table, because, as I said, in short-handed games you way more often play against the same opponent. And if he's even, especially like if he's got position on you or something, you just can't do much against it. You will either have to be prepared for very hard battles, or you will just have to leave the table, or you're just like giving up lots of spots, lots of pots, and probably even losing money against him. If there is no big fish, there is no need to do that. One more thing, upper left actually, we now have seen this Mustachi guy donk bet in lots of situations. In the last hand, he even donk bet he bet in an unraised pot $1 into $0.5 and then folded to a check raise. So actually, since we now see that he's donk betting virtually every flop, I think in retro perspective, with the deuces on the 8-8-9 flop we had, raising would have been possible, because since he's donk betting so much, he can't have something every time. Here he's even folding to min raise after getting very great odds. So it probably really had absolutely nothing. But first of all, you have to know that. You can't expect that to be a fact from right from the start. You have to find that out first, of course. And the way to find that out is, of course, not like trying to bluff him like without a read, and then wonder why you get 3-bet. But it's of course better to do it the other way around. Just fold and wait if you get the read and then react to it. So you shouldn't assume the more aggressive and more strange guy thing to be right just to justify some more aggressive play. Lower left with the jacks, of course, against the button first in limper. We again just raise like like 5 big blinds plus 1 for being out of position. Pretty standard. We had that with the pocket nines. Now the big blind poster with the short stack re-raises, and after having so much money committed, and this being short-handed and not full ring at all, and him raising a strange amount, I'm certainly going broke here. I just want to know how much equity I need here. Yeah, I need like 35% equity, and I'm pretty certain we do have that. Just do a very short analysis here with jacks. Let's go against a very tight range. Yeah, because even here we have the needed equity, so. And queens plus an ace king is of course a ridiculously tight range, so we're just sticking it in here pre-flop. Calling ups of course makes no sense since we would be completely committed. Yeah, so I'm just 4-betting pre-flop all in, and in this case he has kings, but you can't avoid that. Against his range, it's completely profitable to go broke. Yeah, so you don't have to think much about that. And yeah, I think I'm gonna pause and fast forward a little bit to see maybe some more important hands. I hope I gave you a really small but some kind of an introduction into short-handed play. And now I'm gonna like see for bigger and more interesting hands. Here, for example, standard preflop spot. From the cutoff, first in we raise our ace queen, which is like standard. And we then get 3-bet by the button. This is almost always a fold, actually. There's very few opponents against which you could like call, which I absolutely don't like, or 4-bet for like play 4-bet call, which I don't like as well on NL25. But it's not completely off if you think about doing it. But here without a read and against some 13-13 guy, it's an absolute no-brainer fold. Actually, yeah, there's no reason at all to play that hand. Just wanted to show that. And here one small preflop spot as well. We have that GE power guy limping first in out of middle position with an ace 2 suited on the cutoff. What's our best play here? Once again, I think everything is possible. I think we can raise here. It wouldn't be the worst thing. Since, yeah, he's not too passive pre-flop, but very loose. So it's very likely that he would have raised better hands by himself. But he might limp call worse hands. The problem is a little bit that our hand also is pretty marginal, even against some losers range. And we would very often commit ourselves on the flop with a continuation bet. So stacks, due to stack size, I don't like raising that much. Folding I don't like too much as well, because he seems to be bad, and I like to play speculative hands against in multi-way pots. And if he's limping, and we are limping here also, it gets less likely that the button will raise. If you're limping first in short-handed, very often the button or cutoff or maybe even the blinds will raise you because your limp is very weak, and they can take down the pot either pre-flop or post-flop very often. But here you would have to raise against two opponents and against the loose bad limper guy. And now it gets less likely that we get isolated because somebody will need a hand to do that. So it's possible to limp here, to hope to see a 3, 4, 5-way flop. Unraised, and if you get raised afterwards, you can just fold. And here we flop or nut flush draw. Normally, I would play this one passive in position if somebody's betting, because raising doesn't make too much sense. If we get 3-bet, we will just have to fold. And very often, especially on this limit, we have lots of implies against a lone 1 pair or something. If we just call here, so it's okay to just call as well. But since everybody's checking, I am betting here. We just have ace high, which is very unlikely to be the best hand, but very often the 6 or 7 is check folding here. And even against the king, we have 12 outs, so it's not too bad. That way around as well. And if somebody has the worst draw, we of course want to bloaten up the pot. Getting check raised in an unraised pot is pretty unlikely, so I am betting here. Yeah, and like everybody folds here, I can tell you, because I have another interesting hand. Upper left, the deuces in this spot are, in my opinion, a very standard set value cold call. There's no need in squeezing. Him cold calling, he would actually be a good target for a squeeze. So squeezing here, like 3-betting, like more or less for a bluff. But he certainly isn't. 38, 21, I think he can very easily flat call my 3-bet or 4-bet with lots of hands against it, so it doesn't make sense to bluff him. But I have very great implied odds against those 200 big blinds, and against him I think I have even very good implieds because he seems to be bad. Small blind is like very tight, aggressive. I doubt we have much implieds against him, but he's very unlikely to squeeze as well. And the big blind is bad as well. I want him in the pot too, so calling here is clearly better than 3-betting. Yeah, just hope to see a deuce in the flop. Since we don't, we're just folding. On a board like this, we would certainly fast play our set, but yeah, we don't have it, so we are certainly just giving it up and see what else we got. Once more or less a preflop hand. Here ace-8 suited on the button against some limper for a little bit more than 100 big blinds. I actually do like a lot raising here, since like isolating gives us the opportunity to take down the pot either preflop or postflop very often. Our hand has a good playability in position, even in raised pots. And this is actually why I do think that raising in this case is way better than limping. The difference to the last hand is, first of all, our hand is a little stronger. The effective stacks are way bigger, and the opponent is not as loose as the last one was. And this altogether makes this a raise instead of a limp like in the last hand. So we just make it 5 big blinds, which is pretty standard. And we flop 30-0 on a very dry board. And our limp calling opponent finally decides to do something. To donk bet. Pretty big. The question is, once again, what to do. And without a read here, first of all, I'm folding. This wouldn't be the worst spot to bluff raise, since the board is so absolutely dry that he just can't have much. I think he will need to have top pair or better to stand a raise. And there's basically just queen and just the queen, and there's not too many queens that he's limp calling with. Pocket 3s and pocket 5s, pocket 5s and pocket 7s, and that's basically it. So I also think that on the board as dry as this one, if he's donk betting, he most of the time has nothing, because it doesn't make sense to donk bet into the preflop aggressor. I'm always betting here, so if he had a hand, he would most of the times check raise. If he's betting, this is very often weakness. But without the read, it's absolutely no problem just folding this spot, because even if it's very often weak, we also would have to risk lots of money to find that out. If you're raising here, we would need to make it 6 at least. So we're risking $6 to win 4.7. So he needs to be folding in probably 60% of the cases. Since we don't know that, and we might be absolutely wrong against this opponent, we might lose a lot by expected value. We might lose a lot of our $6 invested. So it's no problem just folding. I just wanted to say that it would be possible, and this spot would even be a good one. And one more thing about short-handed is that you can sometimes 3-bet lighter than your pure value range. Actually, here Queen 10 suited on the button would be a hand that we most of the times would just fold here against some cutoff first in raise. But he actually got way more active than he is now by 17, 14. Since we just forehanded, he's been raising a fair lot, and I have been playing super tight on that table so far. So this is a spot in which you can 3-bet with suited connectors, suited one-gappers or small pocket pair, just because you have so much fold equity against him that it's immediately profitable. And the other thing is that sometimes he's even doing mistakes against you post-flop. So I think even if we're behind from equity, if he's calling here, we are in the better position and hopefully the better player, that it still will be profitable for us if he just calls here. but he will just so very often fold that it's okay. He certainly should not overdo that against no opponent short-handed. But sometimes you can throw a 3-bet like this one here in, especially in position, against tight aggressive opponents. You shouldn't do that against loose aggressive guys or or against maniacs, but against tight aggressive guys it's very effective because they raise a lot first in, but they also fold a lot to 3-bets. And I have 2 more pretty standard spots which I'm still going to show you. Lower left, ace king offsuit for first in standard raise for 4 big blinds, and we get 3-bet to 12 big blinds by 100 big blind stack. And without too much explanation, this is just a fold. The best thing you can do here against an unknown opponent is folding. Let's see through the other options. If we re-raise here with ace king, we're certainly not 4-bet folding, so we would be 4-bet calling. The question is, how profitable can that be? I think with 4-betting, we still take it down here pre-flop pretty often against him. But since we're raising from UTG, we don't know him, so we can assume on NL25 people very often 3-bet pretty tight. So he's still very often continuing, and against his continuing range, I assume we are behind. So I think 4-betting at the first part would be a minus EV spot, even though if we 4-betted, we would be forced to call, but 4-betting in the first thing would be minus EV since his range is already so tight. And he's not going broke with a range that is worse than ace king offsuit. That 4-betting would be minus EV. The question is, how about calling? The problem is we're calling for 1 to 11 implied odds with a hand that misses 2 of 3 flops. And if we hit, it's pretty unlikely we will get paid. We might get paid on an ace-high board by ace queen or on a king-high board by king queen or something, but he's not very frequently 3-betting that pre-flop, and if he is, he's not always stacking off post-flop. The problem with speculative one-pair hands is that they rarely get paid off by other one-pair hands, especially if it's a hand that needs to connect with the board. I mean, by aces you can get paid off by jacks because both is an overpair, but here, especially if it's very unlikely he has another top pair hand, you will need to go broke on the flop with less than top pair to make this profitable. And since you can't at all assume that, just folding actually is way the best play here for 100 big blinds and without any read. And more or less the same spot here. Ace king offsuit for 100 big blinds effective against the raise and the cold call. This is a standard 3-bet, and I would actually make it 3 times the raise plus once for the cold callers, so I'm 3-betting 16 big blinds. And in this case, actually the first in raiser, who's been playing pretty tight for the first 66 hands, like 15-10. Oh, sorry, I forgot to explain my stats. Yeah, I hope this is not a big problem, because I think, doesn't make too much sense to explain it now, but here the upper left value is VPIP, upper right is PFR. I don't think I have used lower left value, the aggression factor, or very right, the Vintage Showdown. The blue value is number of hands. I think that has came gone through my explanations, but yeah, sorry for forgetting that, but I think it's not a big problem. In this case, now he's 4-betting, and let's see what's the best situation, what the best play here. Of course, if we are calling, we are always going broke, so the question is, do we want to stick that 21 in there? And we would call like 21 to win a pot of 51.35. Actually, rake is not included. The pot we can win is actually smaller. So we would need like around about 41% equity with our ace king offsuit. And let's see against what range we would have that. Let's take... This is actually a loose range for him to have, I think. Even against that range, we are more behind. So you would need to 4-bet looser than queens plus and ace king to make going broke with ace king here profitable. And if you don't have a read on him and know that he is possibly adjusting to the fact that we are squeezing and is maybe four betting with a looser range like this, and still it would be minus UE against this. So he would need to four bet with an ace. If he's four betting with a range like this, tens plus an ace queen, then it's a good spot for us to go broke, because we just need 41% and we have 48. But since this is absolutely wrong against an unknown opponent on NL25, you can assume his range to be more like queens plus an ace king or even tighter, and against this range you have a very clear, very easy fold. And this is what I did. So yeah, we had a couple of preflop spots with ace king, and yeah, I don't have any more interesting hands, but I think, or I at least hope, that this was an interesting introduction into short-handed play, both pre-flop and post-flop, and you maybe can use it for a start, or if you're just starting, you can watch through this and see how my standards match with yours, or in which situations they don't, and you maybe can take something from this into your own play. With those words, I want to finish this video. Thank you for watching. This was Hasenbraten for PokerStrategy.com.